Sometimes the simplest handicap maybe is the best handicap. And what were we saying going in? Do you really want to bet against Patrick Mahomes? And that's what happened in this one.
Right. This was the entire crux of my reasoning on picking the Super Bowl was, do you really want to bet against Patrick Mahomes? And if there is 2 minutes left to play in this game, and I didn't think it would be overtime, but still, if there's 2 minutes left to play, Patrick Mahomes is, starting a drive down the field, aren't you feeling really nervous if you're on the Niners? And that turned out to be the case. That's how this game ended. We were lucky enough to see one of the best to ever do it, do one of the best things to ever do it. Leading these game-winning drives, coming from behind. And they showed a stats at halftime on Patrick Mahomes. I believe he was like 8-2 in playoff games in which he trailed by like 7 points or more. And so I was like, all right, you might as well post like a QR code to the sports books and say, okay, go ahead and live bet the Chiefs now. At halftime, the Chiefs were getting 5.5 points. I believe the live line on the money line was plus 180. So I think we all kind of saw it coming a little bit just because the first half did not look like the Chiefs. They looked unprepared. They looked sloppy. They were getting all these penalties, but we knew that we would see some semblance of a good team. And that's all they had to do was just hang around. Because Jenks, didn't it feel like this game was much further apart than it actually was? Like the score for most of the first half was either 3-0 or like 10-0. But still, you cannot sit on that kind of lead against Patrick Mahomes and company. What another comeback win for the Chiefs, and certainly something to add to the legacy for one of the greatest to ever do it.
Yeah, I kept thinking the same thing watching this game early on, where the Niners were in control and they were dominating time of possession. They certainly had more plays than the Chiefs, but they just couldn't push through and build on that. And the longer this game stayed close, you had to feel like this is not going to be good for San Francisco if the ball is in Mahomes' hands late. So what you need to do here is you need to build on the fact that you have some momentum here, and they just could not do it. They just could not do it. Now, part of that was self-inflicted. Part of that was the Chiefs' defense. But the Chiefs seemed really discombobulated early, having a lot of issues with that Niners defense. They were just throwing four-man rushes at Patrick Mahomes. His timing was off. But with a great player like it normally is, Chelsa, if you give him long enough to adjust, if you give Andy Reid long enough to adjust, eventually they come around more often than not, and that's exactly what happened.
Do you think the Chiefs have what it takes to possibly get a three-peat?
It's certainly possible. And look, these guys were already talking about it last night. Patrick Mahomes, after the game, said, yeah, I'm going to go back. I'm going to celebrate. I'm going to enjoy this win, and then I'm going to get back to work because I'm trying to three-peat. Even Kelsey was saying that. These guys are hyper motivated to continue making history, and they know that they're on the precipice of being able to do it because it hasn't been done before. Man, everything has to fall the right way. Remember, as much as it may seem like, oh, of course the Chiefs are going to three-peat, we haven't seen a back-to-back winner in 19 years. That was the Patriots. So the idea, I think we're going to see a lot of people lean into the idea, oh, it's the Chiefs. It doesn't matter. Even Tom Brady never did that. And look, is it possible? Sure. But a three-peat in the National Football League, you just don't see it. So I would bet against it based on recent history, but certainly at the same time, you learn a lot of lessons when you bet against Patrick Mahomes.
I think a lot of people were shaking their heads. I think that was the craziest part of last night is that I felt like I bet on the Chiefs simply because I was afraid to go against them. Like it wasn't my full unwavering confidence in Kansas City, especially against this Niners team. It was just like, okay, they have a generational talent at quarterback. This is the most important position on the field. Do I want to be sitting here with 2 minutes left in the game and be worrying about like, oh no, they've got the ball. No. This is how it ends, isn't it? And that's how the game ended. So I think when you have somebody like that, it can be really tough to bet against him. But here's a question I have, and I know you don't work at a sports book, and I'm not expecting like a super sharp answer here, but do you think if we are put in this position again, that Patrick Mahomes will be a Super Bowl underdog in near future? Like, I feel like I would be super nervous. Like, I know the books don't work on emotion, but still, you've got to think if they give Patrick Mahomes points in the Super Bowl again,
Yeah.
they got to be feeling nervous.
Oh my God. Well, and the books took a bath last night, by the way. The Chiefs and overtime were both like the worst results for the book because I believe going to overtime was the biggest liability for the books, like 11-1 at some places. So that happens. And then they desperately need the Niners and then the Chiefs win. So last night was a massive night for the public. And I think you're right. I think it'll be a long time before even in this spot, we will see Mahomes as a dog. And here's the thing too, Chelsea, is all of this is based on a sample size, based on numbers. These are computers that are spitting out, all sorts of different outcomes. And at what point can you take something that you can't measure into account? Do you know what I mean? Where there are some players who just have it. There are some players who have a way of rising to the occasion. And you can say, of course, this quarterback means X amount of points to this club, and no one means more to his team than Patrick Mahomes. But what this clutch gene or ability to perform when it matters the most, that's something you can't really quantify. And yet you do have to take into consideration if you're going to bet for or against the Chiefs.
There are only 2 quarterbacks that I think have beaten Patrick Mahomes in the postseason. And maybe it's in the Super Bowl. No, it's not the Super Bowl because it's an AFC guy. And I saw this graphic, and it's Tom Brady and Joe Burrow. Isn't this the team that's kind of flying under the radar right now? The Cincinnati Bengals? Joe Burrow has been hurt for most of the year. Ain't nobody talking about swaggy Joe Burrow right now. But over at BetMGM, the Bengals to win the Super Bowl looks like are 10-1. Do you think if there's any team that maybe has a shot against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, maybe it's Joey Burrow?
That stood out to me immediately. That stood out to me, and also the Eagles stood out to me because they're 16-1. Bengals are 14-1. But whenever you have incredible quarterback play, and the Eagles being a year removed from the Super Bowl, and the Bengals being a couple years removed from the Super Bowl, you've got guys who have been there, guys who have proven themselves as MVP type quarterbacks or MVP winners in the NFL. So yeah, I'm like you. That's really the roll of the dice with Cincinnati. Seriously, it's can Joe Burrow stay healthy? And if he does, I love the value at 14-1. I really like the Eagles because I think they figure out their coordinator issue during the offseason. They're still massively talented. It's not like they don't have a ton of talent on that roster anyway. Those were the 2 that stood out to me where I thought that's a lot of value for 2 very good quarterbacks.
I will say the sabotage factor maybe for the Bengals is the fact that they lost their offensive coordinator. And we have seen just how important coordinators can be. You're talking about the Eagles. Them losing their coordinators looked like a totally different team this year. So we will see just how meaningful Brian Callahan was to the offense for the Bengals because now he's the head coach of my Tennessee Titans. But one would think that Joe Burrow, if healthy, can do a lot of things because look what he did with that franchise. It's not just the coordinators. You got to make the throws and you got to, be the quarterback that is leading the way. It's not just, the schematics. So we'll see for Joe Burrow, but it will be interesting. Do you think this is the correct time of year to bet on these teams? For me, I like to wait at least until after training camp because you always see that back-breaking injury of somebody getting hurt in training camp, somebody tearing their ACL, and you're like, oh, great, maybe I shouldn't have bet on, Super Bowl futures in the month of February.